Good morning. Good morning, everyone. You may have received via email um, a transcript and recording of a talk given in October of 2018. We forgot to mention that that was at the request, a special request of Eric and others. So I hope that was appreciated. It's strange to revisit that. It seems like so long ago. It seems like everything before COVID is long ago, but here we are today. So we've been discussing the Vimalakirti Sutra, and the chapter we're up to is called Beyond Comprehension. And the setting is that finally, someone has gone to inquire about Vimalakirti's illness as he lies in his bed in this 10 by 10 room that he occupies. And now that Manjushri has agreed to go talk to him, all of these other individuals, all 32,000 of them, or more, want to tag along, and they want to see what's going on. So they're all coming along and to watch this interaction between Manjushri and Vimalakirti. And one of the people tagging along is Shariputra, one of the Buddha's disciples. And as Shariputra enters the room, it says he observed that there were no seats in Vimalakirti's room. And Vimalakirti, knowing what he was thinking, said, "Did you come here for the sake of the Dharma, or are you just looking for a place to sit?" So Shariputra, of course, responds, I came for the Dharma, not for a seat. Shariputra, said Vimalakirti, a seeker of the Dharma doesn't concern himself even with life or limb, much less a seat. A seeker of the Dharma seeks nothing in the way of form, perception, conception, volition, or consciousness. She seeks nothing in the way of sense realms or sense media, seeks nothing in the threefold world of desire, form, and formlessness. Shariputra, a seeker of the Dharma does not seek it through attachment to the Buddha, does not seek it through attachment to the Dharma, does not seek it through attachment to the order. A seeker of the Dharma does not seek it through recognition of suffering, does not seek it through renunciation of attachments, does not seek it through realization of how to end attachments or through practice of the way. Why? Because the Dharma has nothing to do with idle theorizing. To declare that one must recognize suffering, renounce attachments, realize how to reach extinction, and practice the way is mere idle theorizing, not seeking the Dharma. Shariputra, the Dharma is called tranquil extinction, but if one strives for birth, followed by extinction, this is seeking birth and extinction. This is not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is called unstained, but if one is stained with the idea of the Dharma or of nirvana, then one is stained with attachment, and this is not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma has no goal of activity. But if one actively pursues the Dharma, one is pursuing a goal, and this is not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma knows no picking and choosing, but if one picks and chooses the Dharma, this is picking and choosing, not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is independent of place, but if one fixes on the idea of place, this is fixation with place, not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is called formless. If one tries to know it through form, this is seeking form, not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is not something that can be resided in. If one tries to reside in it, this is trying to reside in the Dharma, not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is not something that can be seen, heard, perceived, or understood. If one tries to see, hear, perceive, and understand it, this is trying to see, hear, perceive, and understand the Dharma, not seeking the Dharma. The Dharma is called unconditioned. If one tries to approach it through the conditioned, this is seeking the conditioned, not seeking the Dharma. Therefore, Shariputra, if one would be a seeker of the Dharma, one must not seek it in anything at all. Well, for those of you familiar with the Heart Sutra, this language may sound familiar. This language of denial. It's not this, it's not that. And despite Vimalakirti's kind of swaggering style of speech, I think he's pointing to a deep humility. The word Dharma is confusing for us because it's used in all kinds of different ways. It can mean simply phenomena. It can mean the teaching of the Buddha. And with a capital D, it generally means reality, the universal order. And I think in this passage, Vimalakirti is talking about the Dharma with a capital D. Actually, Burton Watson doesn't use the term Dharma with a capital D. He uses the term law with a capital L. But I think law is a kind of a fraught term in English. And so I've left it untranslated as Dharma, as it would have been in the Sanskrit text. When translated into Chinese, they would translate that way, the way with a capital W. So I think Vimalakirti is pointing out that the Dharma, reality, the universal order of things, is something that we can't quite comprehend. We can't quite grasp it. Human consciousness can't get around it. So that when we think we've got it, we're wrong. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that the teachings of the Buddha and other wisdom teachings are of no value, because they point the way. They point the direction. But they are not the way. And one thing that can help us, since what we're seeking is beyond comprehension, is the human imagination. And I think the rather outlandish events that occur in this sutra are to activate our imagination. So the next part of this chapter, which I won't read word for word, is about how Vimalakirti, despite sort of comfort shaming Shariputra about wanting a seat, then goes on to provide seats for all of his 32,000 guests. And since he's a good host, he wants to provide the best seats available. So he asks Manjushri, where are the best lion seats available? You may have seen these lion chairs that, that have claws on the bottom and a lion's head on the top, and as fit for royalty. So he wants to obtain lion chairs for everybody. And he asks where the best ones can be obtained. And Manjushri, having widely traveled, knows that in a world many, 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 many light years away to the east, there's a kingdom ruled by a Buddha, Sumeru Lamp King. And in Sumeru Lamp King's kingdom, there are these wonderful lion chairs. So he has 32,000 of them brought back to his room, just like that. Well, these chairs of exquisite design are also of immense size. They're described as being 42 yojanas tall. And we're not familiar with the measure of a yojana, but a yojana is, as I understand it from the footnote, the distance that the king's army can march in a day. So these are very, very large chairs. And his guests, in order to sit in the chairs, also have to be very, very large. So they, with Vimalakirti's assistance, become very, very large. But surprisingly enough, these 32,000 chairs with very large guests fit into the 10 by 10 room. And it even goes on to describe that that occurs without any bulging of the walls, that everything from the outside looks just as it was. The house and the town are not affected by this remarkable event of the 32,000 guests of Vimalakirti. And Vimalakirti is then trying to explain to Shariputra how all of this can come about. And he says, Shariputra, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have an emancipation that is called beyond comprehension. When a bodhisattva dwells in this emancipation, he can take something as tall and broad as Mount Sumeru and put it inside a mustard seed without enlarging one or shrinking the other. And Mount Sumeru, king of mountains, will still have its original shape. Moreover, the four heavenly kings and the gods who live on Mount Sumeru will not even know or realize where they have gone. Only those destined for enlightenment will be able to see that Sumeru has been put inside a mustard seed. This is called dwelling in the doctrine of the emancipation beyond comprehension. So the human imagination can defy our usual spatial restrictions and also time. Shariputra, suppose there are beings who want to live in this world for a long time, but are qualified to enter nirvana. This bodhisattva can stretch 7 days into an eon, so that to those beings, they really seem like a whole eon. Or if there are beings who do not want to live in this world for long, and they are qualified to enter enlightenment, this bodhisattva can squeeze an eon into 7 days, so that to those beings it seems like only 7 days. So that both time and space are defied by the human imagination. So the imagination can help us. Obviously, the imagination is a strong tool. It's like a power tool. It's capable of doing things that ordinarily we would not be able to do. For better or for worse. As with any power tool, it's important to use it wisely, carefully, so that you don't use the power tool to, for instance, cut off your thumb. And it's important to use the imagination wisely. For instance, not to use it to fabricate a world in which a satanic cult of pedophiles is running the government and needs to be destroyed. But the imagination can be used creatively, and the teachings of the Buddha can serve as a guide to direct them for the benefit of beings. Carol and I listened to a talk about a week ago by a Zen teacher, Dario Doshin, who was in Rome, and he was giving a talk, and we were listening to it at the same time. Remarkable, but possible now in this age of electronics. And Dario Doshin actually received much of his Zen training in San Francisco, California, but is from Italy and now resides in Rome. and leads a Zen group there. He does a lot of prison work. So he talked about that during part of his talk. He talked about going into the prisons and how it took him quite some time to gain access, because initially he presented himself as a Buddhist teacher, and in that Catholic country, he was not welcomed to give sessions in the prison. But then, as mindfulness sort of gained grip in the popular culture, he presented himself as a mindfulness instructor and an anger management counselor, and was allowed to enter the prisons. So he has a group there in the prison in Rome. And that was going quite well. And the warden came to him and said, you know, we have a separate section of the prison for sex offenders. I wonder if you would be willing to meet with them. And Dario Doshin explained that in Italy, the sex offenders are kept in a separate area because they are so despised by the other prisoners in that culture that they end up getting killed by the other prisoners if they mix them. And Dario, growing up in that culture, also had this same kind of aversion against anyone who would harm a woman or a child. But he had heard that greater than 90% of sex offenders have been abused themselves as children. Now, looking into this, I recognize that that's probably not exactly true, but it's a common belief. There is an association, but it's not that strong. But in any case, that was what he had heard. So he used his imagination to see the child in those sex offenders, their child selves, and to meet them in that way. And that allowed him to be more comfortable talking to them. And of course, once he made contact and got to know them as people, it was much easier. So the project that Vimalakirti sets for us is the project of maintaining grace in a universe that is fundamentally incomprehensible. And the recommendation is to use the Buddha's teachings, but not glom on to the teachings as reality in themselves, but as pointers, as guides, as ways to align oneself with the Dharma, with the way. So as to be of benefit to oneself and others. So he asks us to guard ourselves against getting stuck on words, concepts, precepts, ideologies, and notions which humans are so prone to do. And to have faith in the Dharma. And make use, if you can, of the amazing powers of the human imagination. So I think I'll stop there. And with that thought, how do we use the imagination constructively? How do we live with grace in a fundamentally incomprehensible universe? And do we know examples of that in our own lives? I think I'll break up into groups at this time for that discussion, and then we can get back together after a few minutes and see what thoughts there are. Thank you so much for listening.